Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I am David Sneathen. This is JJ. There's Daniel over there. And Kimmy's somewhere around too. So, we are, yeah, I got my hair cut. So, put in your comments whether or not you think that my hair looks better in this video or in the last video. So, and it doesn't really matter because I'm in the Army, so I have to have my hair cut like the Army wants me to have it cut. I can't send a link. Why not? All right. Okay. So, I think let me see if I have a link. I don't have a link. Oh, I do. There I am. Share. I can start a watch party. I want to share on Messenger. This is weird. Okay, wait a second. Okay, live now. And I don't know how to do this. Oh, Mom's live. Yay! Okay, so we're 2 minutes into the show. Okay, we don't need flashlights. Okay, Rebecca's here. Yay! Balderdash. I don't know what Balderdash is. But hi, this is JJ. And yay! Okay, so go ahead and say something. Go ahead and say something.
Hi.
Okay, so we're going to read Proverbs chapter 16. Today is the 16th day of the month of April. So we're going to read in your face. Okay, so that's good. Today is the 16th month of the 16th month of the day of April. Yay. The 16th day of the month of April. So we're going to read You Owe Me Lots of Chocolate. Okay, all right. So, whoa, dude. Hey, okay, hey, buddy, this only works if you actually are listening. Why don't we have this open? There you go. All right. Hi, I'm back. This is Heavy D Storytelling, and I'm David Sneathen. Hi. Okay, so, dude, we're gonna start reading. All right. So we're a little bit rambunctious. We just finally watched the last episode of the first season of Mandalorian. Of course, the second season hasn't been made yet, so it's the last episode that's been made. So we're all a little bit hyper, I think. Okay, so this is chapter 16 from the book of Proverbs. The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. The Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. Everyone who is arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished. By steadfast love and faithfulness, iniquity is atoned for, and by the fear of the Lord one turns away from evil. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. You can stop doing that right now. The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. An oracle is on the lips of a king, his mouth does not sin in judgment. Sorry about that. A just balance and scales are the Lord's, all the weights in the bag are his work. It is an abomination to kings to do evil, for the throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of a king, and he loves him who speaks what is right. A king's wrath is a messenger of death, and a wise man will appease it. In the light of a king's face there is life, and his favor is like the cloud that brings the spring rain. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. The highway of the upright turns aside from evil. Whoever guards his way preserves his life. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It is better to be of a lowly spirit with the poor than to divide the spoil with the proud. Whoever gives thought to the word will discover good, and blessed is he who trusts in the Lord. The wise of heart is called discerning, and sweetness of speech increases persuasiveness. Good sense is a fountain of life to him who has it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise makes his speech judicious, and adds persuasiveness to his lips. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. There is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way to death. A worker's appetite works for him, his mouth urges him on. A worthless man plots evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. A dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisper separates close friends. A man of violence entices his neighbor, and leads him in a way that is not good. Whoever winks his eye plans dishonest things. He who purses his lips brings evil to pass. Gray hair is a crown of glory. It is gained in a righteous life. Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. That is Proverbs chapter 16. Again, this is the 16th day of April. So here we are reading Proverbs chapter 16. We are more than halfway through April now. So we are going to begin the end of the world. The Dawn Treader Voyage. So I hope you're ready. But before we begin this ending of the story, I've got Kimberly here ready to give us her synopsis.
In the last few chapters, they sailed a bit more and they found this island. So they go over to the island and they see this big feast. But before they eat at the feast, they see three people who are like they don't really look like people. They look like big wads of hair. And apparently they've been sleeping there for 7 years, and they're the last of the lords, and they got in a fight. And let's see. Then when they saw this stone dagger that was the same dagger that the White Witch tried to kill Aslan with, but when they touched it, they all fell asleep. And so
She did kill Aslan.
but it didn't work out, did it?
Yeah, but Aslan did die
Uh,
on the stone table, right?
but he came back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Just like Jesus died on the cross.
right,
Aslan died on the stone table.
right, I guess so. But anyway, then they saw this. Then they decided to stay up all night, over by the table,
And who
and
did they meet?
they met. I forget her name.
I don't know if they ever told us her name. But they told us the dad's name. What
Yeah.
was the dad's name?
I forget that too.
Ramondu.
Okay, so Ramondu's daughter, she said, "Why aren't you eating this?" And they're like, "Because it put these guys to sleep." Because they hadn't heard about the stone knife and stuff. And so she's like, no, it was. And then she told the story. And then she said, no, wait, she told them to go to her dad, Ramondu. And then he told them the story and then said that he was a retired star, apparently. JJ, stop messing around, please. So he was a retired star, and every morning the birds give him a fire fruit, right? Yeah, a fire fruit, and that makes him a bit younger each day. And so after a while of this, he's gonna eventually become young again and become a star. But anyway, he says you're at the beginning of the end of the world, and so they say, oh hey, we should go all the way. We're gonna go all the way to the end of the world, and oh hey, look, we have to, in order to break the curse on these three guys, we have to go to the end of the world and leave someone there. And Reepicheep, he's like, oh, I always wanted to do that. So
That's like his life in this.
yeah. So so then after that they tell the crew members, and everybody but one they go. That one guy stays behind and he regrets it for the rest of the story. And so that's about where we are, right, Dad? And then they just set sail.
Okay. Hi, I'm back. Oh, I promised JJ we could say goodnight to Rebecca. Whoa, whoa, whoa. No, whoa.
Night, Becca. Night, Mommy. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Oh.
No. It doesn't need to be like that. I can do it myself. Hi. So we are going to start with chapter 15, and we're going to read until the end of the book. And then tomorrow, we're going to do something a little bit different. So, and I know we just established this new time, but I think we're gonna go back to the 7 o'clock time so that we can do a shortened version that we're gonna include the Proverbs, and I might do a short story, and that's gonna be it for tomorrow because we have something that the kids are doing at 7:30. So in order to accommodate all of that, we're gonna do a short abridged version of our reading time tomorrow night. But for tonight, we're going to finish, and chapter 15 is called The Wonders of the Last Sea. Very soon after they had left Ramondu's country, they began to feel that they had already sailed beyond the world. All was different. For one thing, they all found that they were needing less sleep. One did not want to go to bed, nor to eat much, nor even to talk except in low voices. Another thing was the light. There was too much of it. The sun, when it came up each morning, looked twice, if not 3 times, its usual size. And every morning, which gave Lucy the strangest feeling of all, the huge white birds, singing their song with human voices in a language no one knew, streamed overhead and vanished astern on their way to their breakfast at Aslan's table. A little later they came flying back and vanished into the east. "How beautifully clear the water is," said Lucy to herself, as she leaned over the port side early in the afternoon of the second day. And it was. The first thing that she noticed was a little black object about the size of a shoe traveling along at the same speed as their ship. For a moment she thought it was something floating on the surface, but then there came floating past a bit of stale bread which the cook had just thrown out of the galley, and the bit of bread looked as if it was going to collide with the black thing, but it didn't. It passed above it, and Lucy now saw that the black thing could not be on the surface. Then the black thing suddenly got very much bigger and flicked back to normal size a moment later. Now Lucy knew she had seen something just like that happen Something just like that happened somewhere else, if only she could remember where it was. She held her hand to her head and screwed up her face and put out her tongue in an effort to remember. At last she did. Of course, it was like what you saw from a train on a bright sunny day. You saw the black shadow of your own coach running along the field at the same pace as the train. Then you went into a cutting, and immediately the same shadow flicked close up to you and got big, racing along the grass of the cutting bank. Then you came out of the cutting, and flick! Once more the black shadow had gone back to its normal size and was running along the fields. "It's our shadow, the shadow of the Dawn Treader," said Lucy. "Our shadow running along on the bottom of the sea. That time when it got bigger it went over a hill, but in that case the water must be clearer than I thought. Good gracious! I must be seeing the bottom of the sea fathoms and fathoms down." As soon as she had said this, she realized that the great silvery expanse which she had been seeing without notice for some time was really the sand on the seabed, and that all sorts of darker or brighter patches were not lights and shadows on the surface, but real things on the bottom. At present, for instance, they were passing over a mass of soft purply green with a broad winding strip of pale grey in the middle of it, but now that she knew it was on the bottom, she saw it much better. She could see that bits of the dark stuff were much higher than other bits and were waving gently, just like trees in a wind, said Lucy, and I do believe that's what they are. It's a submarine forest. They passed on above it, and presently the pale streak was joined by another pale streak. If I was down there, thought Lucy, that streak would be just like a road through a wood, and that place where it joins the other would be a crossroads. Oh, I do wish I was. Hallo! The forest is coming to an end, and I do believe the streak really was a road. I can see I can still see it going on across the open sand. It's a different color now, and it's marked out with something at the edges, dotted lines. Perhaps they are stones, and now it's getting wider. But it was not really getting wider, it was getting nearer. She realized this because of the way in which the shadow of the ship came rushing up toward her, and the road, she felt sure it was a road now, began to go in zigzags. Obviously it was climbing up a steep hill, and when she held her head sideways and looked back, what she saw was very like what you see when you look down a winding road from the top of a hill. She could even see the shafts of sunlight falling through the deep water onto the wooded valley, and in the extreme distance everything melting away into the dim greenness. But some places, the sunny ones, she thought, were ultramarine blue. She could not, however, spend much time looking back. What was coming into view in the forward direction was too exciting. The road had apparently now reached the top of the hill and run straight forward. Little specks were moving to and fro on it, and now something most wonderful, fortunately in full sunlight, for as full as it can be when it falls through fathoms of water, flashed into sight. It was knobbly and jagged and of a pearly or perhaps an ivory color. She was so nearly straight above it that at first she could hardly make out what it was. But everything became plain when she noticed its shadow. The sunlight was falling across Lucy's shoulders, so the shadow of the thing lay stretched out on the sand behind it, and by its shape she saw clearly that it was a shadow of towers and pinnacles, minarets and domes. "Why, it's a city or a huge castle," said Lucy to herself, "but I wonder why they've built it on top of a high mountain." Long afterward, when she was back in England and talked all these adventures over with Edmund, they thought of a reason, and I am pretty sure it is the true one. In the sea, the deeper you go, the darker and colder it gets, and it is down there in the dark and cold that dangerous things live, the squid and the sea serpent and the kraken. The valleys are the wild, unfriendly places. The sea people feel about their valleys as we do about mountains, and feel about their mountains as we feel about valleys. It is on the heights, or as we would say, in the shallows, that there is warmth and peace. The reckless hunters and brave knights of the sea go down into the depths on quests and adventures, but return home to the heights for rest and peace, courtesy and counsel, the sports, the dances, and the songs. They had passed the city, and the seabed was still rising. It was only a few hundred feet below the ship now. The road had disappeared. They were sailing above an open park-like country dotted with little groves of brightly colored vegetation. And then Lucy nearly squealed aloud with excitement. She had seen people. There were between 15 and 20 of them, and all mounted on seahorses, not the tiny little seahorses which you may have seen in museums, but horses rather bigger than themselves. They must be noble and lordly people, Lucy thought, for she could catch the gleam of gold on some of their foreheads, and streamers of emerald or orange-colored stuff fluttered from their shoulders in the current. Then "Oh, bother these fish," said Lucy, for a whole shoal of small fat fish swimming quite close to the surface had come between her and the sea people. But though this spoiled her view, it led to the most interesting thing of all. Suddenly a fierce little fish, of a kind she had never seen before, came darting up from below, snapped, grabbed, and sank rapidly with one of the fat fish in its mouth. And all the sea people were sitting on their horses, staring up at what had happened. They seemed to be talking and laughing, and before the hunting fish had got back to them with its prey, another of the same kind came up from the sea people, and Lucy was almost certain that one big seaman who sat on his seahorse in the middle of the party had sent it or released it, as if he had been holding back till then in his hand or on his wrist. "Why, I do declare," said Lucy, "it's a hunting party, or more like a hawking party. Yes, that's it. They ride out with these little fierce fish on their wrists, just as we used to ride out with falcons on our wrists when we were kings and queens at Caraparavel long ago. And then they fly them, or I suppose I should say they swim them at the others. How—" She stopped suddenly because the scene was changing. The sea people had noticed the Dawn Treader. The shoal of fish had scattered in every direction. The people themselves were coming up to find out the meaning of this big black thing which had come between them and the sun. And now they were so close to the surface that if they had been in air instead of water, Lucy could have spoken to them. There were men and women both. All wore coronets of some kind, and many had chains of pearls. They wore no other clothes. Their bodies were the color of ivory, their hair dark purple. The king in the center, no one could mistake him for anything but the king, looked proudly and fiercely into Lucy's face and shook a spear in his hand. His knights did the same. The faces of the ladies were filled with astonishment. Lucy felt sure they had never seen a ship or a human before, and how should they in seas beyond the world's end, where no ship ever came? Here is a picture of Lucy looking where all the sea people are. There it is. All right. "What are you staring at, Lou?" said a close voice beside her. Lucy had been so absorbed in what she was seeing that she started at the sound, and when she turned she found that her arm had gone dead from leaning so long on the rail in one position. Drinian and Edmund were beside her. "Look," she said. They both looked, but almost at once Drinian said in a low voice, "Turn round at once, your majesties, that's right, with our backs to the sea, and don't look as if we were talking about anything important." "Why, what's the matter?" said Lucy as she obeyed. "It'll never do for the sailors to see all that," said Drinian. "We'll have men falling in love with a sea woman, or falling in love with the undersea country itself and jumping overboard. I've heard of that kind of thing happening before in this strange seas. It's always unlucky to see these people." "But we used to know them," said Lucy, "in the old days at Cair Paravel when my brother Peter was High King. They came to the surface and sang at our coronation." "I think that must have been a different kind, Lou," said Edmund. "They could live in the air as well as under water. I rather think these can't." By the look of them, they'd have surfaced and started attacking us long ago if they could. They seem very fierce. At any rate, began Drinian, but at that moment two sounds were heard. One was a plop, the other was a voice from a fighting top shouting, "Man overboard!" Then everyone was busy. Some of the sailors hurried aloft to take in the sail, others hurried below to get at the oars, and Rince, who was on duty on the poop, began to put the helm hard over so as to come round and back to the man who had gone overboard. But by now everyone knew that it wasn't strictly a man, it was Reepicheep. "Drat that mouse," said Drinian. "It's more trouble than all the rest of the ship's company put together. But there is any scrape to be got into in it he will get. It ought to be put in irons, keel-hauled, marooned, have its whiskers cut off. Can anyone see the little blighter?" All this didn't mean that Drinian really disliked Reepicheep. On the contrary, he liked him very much and was therefore frightened about him, and being frightened put him in a bad temper, just as your mother is much angrier with you for running out into the road in front of a car than a stranger would be. No one, of course, was afraid of Reepicheep's drowning, for he was an excellent swimmer, but the three who knew what was going on below the water were afraid of those long, cruel spears in the hands of the sea people. In the few minutes the Dawn Treader had come round, and everyone could see the black blob in the water which was Reepicheep. He was chattering with the greatest excitement, but as his mouth kept on getting filled with water, nobody could understand what he was saying. "He'll blurt the whole thing out if we don't shut him up," cried Drinian. To prevent this, he rushed to the side and lowered a rope himself, shouting to the sailors, "All right, all right! Back to your places. I hope I can heave a mouse up without any help." And as Reepicheep began climbing up the rope, not very nimbly because his wet fur made him heavy, Drinian leaned over and whispered to him, "Don't tell, not a word." But when the dripping mouse had reached the deck, it turned out not to be at all interested in the sea people. "Sweet!" he cheeped. "Sweet, sweet!" "What are you talking about?" asked Drinian crossly. "And you needn't shake yourself all over me either." "I tell you the water's sweet," said the mouse. "Sweet, fresh, it isn't salt." For a moment no one quite took in the importance of this, but then Reepicheep once more repeated the old prophecy. "Where the waves grow sweet, doubt not, Reepicheep, there is the utter east." Then at last everyone understood. "Let me have a bucket, Ranelph," said Drinian. It was handed him, and he lowered it, and up it came again. The water shone in it like glass. "Perhaps your Majesty would like to taste it first," said Drinian to Caspian. The king took the bucket in both hands, raised it to his lips, sipped, then drank deeply and raised his head. His face was changed. Not only his eyes, but everything about him seemed to be brighter. "Yes," he said, "it is sweet. That's real water, that. I'm not sure that it isn't going to kill me, but it is the death that I would have chosen if I'd known about it till now." "What do you mean?" asked Edmund. It's like the light more than anything else," said Caspian. "That is what it is," said Reepicheep. "Drinking light! We must be very near the end of the world now." There was a moment's silence, and then Lucy knelt down on the deck and drank from the bucket. "It's the loveliest thing I've ever tasted," she said with a kind of gasp. "But oh, it's strong! We shan't need to eat anything now." And one by one everybody on board drank, and for a long time they were all silent. They felt almost too well and strong to bear it, and presently they began to notice another result. As I have said before, there had been too much light ever since they left the island of Ramandu. The sun too large, though not too hot. The sea too bright, the air too shining. Now the light grew no less, if anything it increased, but they could bear it. They could look straight up at the sun without blinking. They could see more light than they had ever seen before, and the deck and the sail and their own faces and bodies became brighter and brighter, and every rope shone. And next morning, when the sun rose, now 5 or 6 times its old size, they stared hard into it, and could see the very feathers of the bird that came flying from it. Birds. Hardly a word was spoken on board all that day, till about dinner-time. No one wanted any dinner. The water was enough for them. Drinian said, "I can't understand this. There is not a breath of wind. The sail hangs dead. The sea is as flat as a pond, and yet we drive on as fast as if there was a gale behind us." "I've been thinking that too," said Caspian. "We must be caught in some strong current." Said Edmund, "that's not so nice. The world really has an edge, and we're getting near to it." "You mean," said Caspian, "that we might be just, well, poured over it." "Yes, yes!" cried Reepicheep, clapping its paws together. "That's how I've always imagined it, the world like a great round table, and the waters of all the oceans endlessly pouring over the edge. The ship will tip up, stand on her head for one moment, we shall see over the edge, and then down, down, the rush, the speed." "And what do you think will be waiting for us at the bottom, eh?" said Drinian. "Aslan's country, perhaps," said the mouse, its eyes shining. "Or perhaps there isn't any bottom. Perhaps it goes on down forever and ever. But whatever it is, won't it be worth anything just to have looked for one moment beyond the edge of the world?" "But look here," said Eustace, "this is all rot. The world's round. I mean round like a ball, not like a table." "Our world is," said Edmund. "But is this?" "Do you mean to say," asked Caspian, "that you three come from a round world, round like a ball, and you've never told me? It's really too bad of you, because we have fairy tales in which there are round worlds, and I've always loved them. I never believed there were any real ones, but I've always wished there were, and I've always longed to live in one. Oh, I'd give anything. I wonder why you can get into our world, and we never get into yours. If only I had the chance. It must be exciting to live on a thing like a ball. Have you ever been to the parts where people walk upside down?" Edmund shook his head. "And it isn't like that," he added. "There's nothing particularly exciting about a round world when you're there." Chapter 16. The very end of the world. I see I've got some comments, so let me see. Rebecca, whoop whoop. Rebecca, great series. Rebecca, now I can show you all my memes. Dad has a gray crown of glory. I don't get it. Maybe she's talking about Rebecca, good night, JJ. JJ, are you still awake? I don't know what he is. Okay, so Kimmy's got a picture she's going to show us.
I made it bigger, and then I added balloons all the way through.
Wow. Very nice, Kimberly. Daniel looks like he's in his bed, but not asleep. JJ looks like he's asleep. He's going to miss the end of the book, which is really sad. Should we save it for him? Put your comments below. If you think we should save the end of the book for JJ, let me know.
I could go and wake him up.
No. He won't wake up. He won't stay awake long enough to finish the book anyway. We've got about 15 pages. I'm waiting for a comment. Nobody's commenting. I advertised a comment. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and finish the book, and JJ can catch it when I read it next time. Okay, chapter 16, or he can read it himself. Chapter 16, the very end of the world. Reepicheep was the only person on board besides Drinian and the two Pevensies who had noticed the sea people. He had dived in at once when he saw the Sea King shaking his spear, for he regarded this as sort of a threat or challenge and wanted to have the matter out there and then. The excitement of discovering that the water was now fresh had distracted his attention, and before he remembered the sea people again, Lucy and Drinian had taken him aside and warned him not to mention what he had seen. As things turned out, they need hardly have bothered, for by this time the Dawn Treader was gliding over a part of the sea which seemed to be uninhabited. Oh, I see I've got a comment. Let's see. Oh, Rebecca said let's save it for him. I'll tell you what, Rebecca, I'm going to go ahead and finish, and I'll read it to him tomorrow. Is that a deal? Okay, that's a deal. As things, no one except Lucy saw anything more of the people, and even she had only one short glimpse. All morning on the following day they sailed in fairly shallow water, and the bottom was weedy. Just before midday, Lucy saw a large shoal of fishes grazing on the weed. They were all eating steadily and all moving in the same direction, just like a flock of sheep, thought Lucy. Suddenly she saw a little sea-girl of about her own age in the middle of them, a quiet, lonely-looking girl with a sort of crook in her hand. Lucy felt sure that this girl must be a shepherdess, or perhaps a fish-herdess, and that the shoal was really a flock at pasture. Both the fishes and the girl were quite close to the surface, and just as the girl, gliding in the shallow water, and Lucy, leaning over the bulwark, came opposite to one another, the girl looked up and stared straight into Lucy's face. Neither could speak to another, and in a moment the sea-girl dropped astern. But Lucy will never forget her face. It did not look frightened or angry like those of the other sea people. Lucy had liked that girl, and she felt certain the girl had liked her. On that one moment they had somehow become friends. There does not seem to be much chance to meet again in that world or any other, but if ever they do, they will rush together with their hands held out. And I've got another comment. It froze. All right, it froze. Do, 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 do. And do, 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 do. Oh, you're back. I'm also front. My back and my front. Okay, good. After that, for many days, without wind in her shrouds or foam at her bows, across the waveless sea the Dawn Treader glided smoothly east. Every day and every hour the light became more brilliant, and still they could bear it. No one ate or slept, and no one wanted to, but they drew buckets of dazzling water from the sea, stronger than wine and somehow wetter, more liquid than ordinary water, and pledged one another silently in deep draughts of it, and one or two of the sailors who had been oldish men when the voyage began now grew younger every day. Everyone on board was filled with joy and excitement, but not an excitement that made one talk. The further they sailed, the less they spoke, and then almost in a whisper, the stillness of that last sea laid hold on them. "My lord," said Caspian to Drinian one day, "what do you see ahead?" "Sire," said Drinian, "I see whiteness all along the horizon from north to south as far as my eyes can reach." "That is what I see too," said Caspian, "and I cannot not imagine what it is." "If we were in higher latitudes, your majesty," said Drinian, "I would say it was ice, but it can't be that, not here. All the same, we'd better get men to the oars and hold the ship back against the current. Whatever the stuff is, we don't want to crash into it at this speed." Then, as Drinian said, and so continued to go slower and slower. The whiteness did not get any less mysterious as they approached it. If it was land, it must be a very strange land, for it seemed just as smooth as the water and on the same level with it. When they got very close to it, Drinian put the helm hard over and turned the Dawn Treader south, so that she was broadside on to the current, and rowed a little way southward along the edge of the whiteness. In so doing, they accidentally made the important discovery that the current was only about 40 feet wide, and the rest of the sea was still as a pond. This was good news for the crew, who had already begun to think that the return journey to Ramonder's land, rowing against stream all the way, would be pretty poor sport. It also explained why the shepherd girl had dropped so quickly astern. She was not in the current. If she had been, she would have been moving east at the same speed as the ship. And still no one could make out what the white stuff was. Then the boat was lowered, and it put off to investigate. Those who remained on the Dawn Treader could see that the boat pushed right in amidst the whiteness. Then they could hear the voices of the party in the boat, clear across the still water, taking in a shrill and surprised way. Then there was a pause while Ranelph in the bows of the boat took a sounding, and when, after that, the boat came rowing back, there seemed to be plenty of the white stuff inside her. Everyone crowded to the side to hear the news. "Lilies, your majesty!" shouted Ranelph, standing up in the bows. "What did you say?" asked Caspian. "Blooming lilies, your majesty," said Ranelph. "Same as in a pool or in a garden at home." "Look," said Lucy, who was in the stern of the boat. She held up her wet arms full of white petals and broad flat leaves. "What's the depth, Ranelph?" said Drinian. "That's the funny thing, Captain," said Ranelph. "It's still deep, 3.5 fathoms clear." "They can't be real lilies, not what we call lilies," said Eustace. Probably they were not, but they were very like them. And when, after some consultation, the Dawn Treader turned back into the current and began to glide eastward through the Lily Lake, or the Silver Sea, they tried both these names, but it was the Silver Sea that stuck, and is now on Caspian's map, the strangest part of their travels began. Very soon the open sea which they were leaving was only a thin rim of blue on the western horizon. Whiteness shot with faintest colour of gold spread round them on every side except just astern, where their passage had thrust the lilies apart and left an open lane of water that shone like dark green glass. To look at this last sea was very like the Arctic, and if their eyes had not by now been grown as strong as eagles', the sun on all that whiteness, especially at early morning, when the sun was hugest, would have been unbearable, and every evening the same whiteness made the daylight last longer. There seemed no end to the lilies. Day after day, from all those miles and leagues of flowers, there rose a smell which Lucy found it very hard to describe. Sweet, yes, but not at all sleepy or overpowering. A fresh, wild, lonely smell that seemed to get into your brain and make you feel that you could go up mountains at a run or wrestle with an elephant. She and Caspian said to one another, "I feel that I can't stand much more of this, yet I don't want it to stop." They took soundings very often, but it was only several days later that the water became shallower. After that it went on getting shallower. There came a day when they had to row out of the current and feel their way forward at a snail's pace, rowing. And soon it was clear that the Dawn Treader could sail no further east. Indeed, it was only by very clever handling that they saved her from grounding. "Lower the boat!" cried Caspian, "and then call the men aft. I must speak to them." "What's he going to do?" whispered Eustace to Edmund. "There's a queer look in his eyes." "I think we probably all look the same," said Edmund. They joined Caspian on the poop, and soon all the men were crowded together at the foot of the ladder to hear the king's speech. "Friends," said Caspian, "we have now fulfilled the quest on which you embarked. The 7 lords are all accounted for, and as Sir Reepicheep has sworn never to return, When you reach Ramandu's land, you will doubtless find the Lords Revilian and Argos and Mavramorn awake. To you, my Lord Drinian, I entrust this ship, bidding you sail to Narnia with all the speed you may, and above all not to land on the island of Death Water, and instruct my regent, the dwarf Trumpkin, to give all these my shipmates the rewards I promised them. They have been earned well, and if I come not again, it is my will that the regent and Master Cornelius and Truffle Hunter the Badger and the Lord Drinian choose a king of Narnia with the consent— But sire, interrupted Drinian, are you abdicating? I am going with Repetit to see the world's end, said Caspian. A low murmur of dismay ran through the sailors. We will take a boat, said Caspian. You will have no need of it in these gentle seas, and you must build a new one on Ramandu's island. And now— Caspian, said Edmund suddenly and sternly, you can't do this. Most certainly, said Reepicheep, His Majesty cannot. No, indeed, said Drinian. Can't? Said Caspian sharply, looking for a moment not unlike his uncle Miraz. Begging your Majesty's pardon, said Ranelf from the deck below, but if one of us did the same, it would be called deserting. You presume too much on your long service, Ranelf, said Caspian. No, sire, he is perfectly right, said Drinian. By the mane of Aslan, said Caspian, I had thought you were all my subjects here, not my schoolmasters. I'm not, said Edmund, and I say you cannot do this. Can't again, said Caspian. What do you mean? If it please your Majesty, we mean shall not, said Reepicheep with a very low bow. You are the king of Narnia. You break faith with all your subjects, and especially with Trumpkin. If you do not return, you shall not please yourself with adventures as if you were a private person. And if your Majesty will not hear reason, it will be the truest loyalty of every man on board to follow me in disarming and binding you till you come to your senses. Quite right, said Edmund, like they did with Ulysses when he wanted to go near the Sirens. Caspian's hand, and if you haven't read the book Odyssey, or the poem by Homer, then you would know what he's talking about. Caspian's hand had gone to his sword hilt when Lucy said, I think it's the Odyssey, when Lucy said, and you've almost promised Ramandu's daughter to go back. Caspian paused. Well, yes, there is that, he said. He stood irresolute for a moment, and then shouted out to the ship in general, Well, have your way. The quest is ended. We all return. Get the boat up again. Sire, said Reepicheep, we do not all return. As I explained before— Silence, thundered Caspian. I've been lessoned, but I'll not be baited. Will no one silence that mouse? Your Majesty promised, said Reepicheep, to be good lord to the talking beasts of Narnia. Talking beasts, yes, said Caspian. I said nothing about beasts that never stop talking. And he flung down the ladder in a temper and went into the cabin, slamming the door. But when the others rejoined him a little later, they found him changed. He was white, and there were tears in his eyes. It's no good, he said. I might as well have behaved decently for all the good I did with my temper and swagger. Aslan has spoken to me. No, I don't mean he was actually here. He wouldn't fit into the cabin, for one thing, but that gold lion's head on the wall came to life and spoke to me. It was terrible. His eyes, not that he was at all rough with me, only a bit stern at first, but it was terrible all the same. And he said, oh, I can't bear it. The worst thing he could have said. You're to go on, Reep, Edmund and Lucy and Eustace, and I'm to go back alone and at once. And what is the good of anything? Caspian, dear, said Lucy, you knew we'd have to go back to our own world sooner or later. Yes, said Caspian with a sob, but this is sooner. You'll feel better when you get back to Ramandu's island, said Lucy. He cheered up a little later on, but it was a grievous parting on both sides, and I will not dwell on it. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, well victualled and watered, though they thought they would need neither food nor drink, and with Reepicheep's coracle on board, the boat pulled away from the Dawn Treader to row through the endless carpet of lilies. The Dawn Treader flew all her flags and hung out her shields to honor their departure. Tall and big and homelike she looked from their low position with the lilies all round them, and even before she was out of sight they saw her turn and begin rowing slowly westward. Yet, though Lucy shed a few tears, she could not feel it as much as you might have expected. The light, the silence, the tingling smell of the silver sea, even, in some odd way, the loneliness itself, were too exciting. There was no need to row, for the current drifted them steadily to the east. None of them slept or ate. All that night and all the next day they glided eastward, and when the third day dawned, brightness you or I could not even bear if we had dark glasses on. They saw a wonder ahead. It was as if a wall stood up between them and the sky, a greenish-gray, trembling, shimmering wall. Then up came the sun, and at first, rising, they saw it through the wall, and it turned into wonderful rainbow colors. Before we go on, I want to just show you this picture of them rowing through the lilies. There they are, the four of them in the coracle. Now I get to find my place again. Then they knew that the wall was really a long, tall wave, a wave endlessly fixed in one place, as you may often see at the edge of a waterfall. It seemed to be about 30 feet high, and the current was gliding them swiftly toward it. You might have supposed they would have thought of their danger. They didn't. I don't think anyone could have in their position, for now they saw something not only behind the wave, but behind the sun. They could not have even seen the sun if their eyes had not been strengthened by the water of the last sea. But now they could look at the rising sun and see it clearly and see things beyond it. What they saw eastward beyond the sun was a range of mountains. It was so high that either they never saw the top of it or they forgot it. None of them remembers seeing any sky in that direction, and the mountains must really have been outside the world, for any mountains even a quarter of a 20th of that height ought to have had ice and snow on them, but these were warm and green and full of forests and waterfalls, however high you looked. And suddenly there came a breeze from the east, tossing the top of the wave into foamy shapes and ruffling the smooth water all round them. It lasted only a second or so, but what it brought them in that second none of those three children will ever forget. It brought both a smell and a sound, a musical sound. Edmund and Eustace would never talk about it afterward. Lucy could only say it would break your heart. Why? Said I. Was it so sad? Sad, no, said Lucy. No one in that boat doubted that they were seeing beyond the end of the world into Aslan's country. At that moment, with a crunch, the boat ran aground. The water was too shallow now for it. This, said Reepicheep, is where I go on alone. They did not even try to stop him, for everything now felt as if it had been fated or had happened before. They helped him to lower his little coracle. Then he took off his sword. I shall need it no more, he said, and flung it far away across the lilied sea. Where it fell it stood upright with the hilt above the surface. Then he bade them good-bye, trying to be sad for their sakes, but he was quivering with happiness. Lucy, for the first and last time, did what she had always wanted to do, taking him in her arms and caressing him. Then hastily he got into his coracle and took his paddle, and the current caught it, and away he went, very black against the lilies. but no lilies grew on the wave. It was a smooth green slope. The coracle went more and more quickly, and beautifully it rushed up the wave's side. For one split second they saw its shape and Reepicheep's on the very top. Then it vanished, and since that moment no one can truly claim to have seen Reepicheep the mouse. But my belief is that he came safe to Aslan's country and is alive there to this day. As the sun rose on the as the sun rose, there needs a comma there. As the sun rose, the sight of those mountains outside the world faded away. The wave remained, but there was only blue sky behind it. The children got out of the boat and waded, not toward the wave, but southward with the wall of water on their left. They could not have told you why they did this. It was their fate. And though they had felt and been very grown up on the Dawn Treader, they now felt just the opposite, and held hands as they waded through the lilies. They never felt tired. The water was warm, and all the time it got shallower. At last they were on dry sand, and then on grass, a huge plain of very fine, short grass, almost level with the silver sea, and spreading in every direction without so much as a molehill. And of course, as it always does in a perfectly flat place without trees, it looked as if the sky came down to meet the grass in front of them. But as they went on, they got the strangest impression that here at last the sky did really come down and join the earth. A blue wall, very bright, but real and solid, more like glass than anything else, and soon they were quite sure of it. It was very near now. But between them and the foot of the sky there was something so white on the green grass that even with their eagle's eyes they could hardly look at it. They came on and saw that it was a lamb. "Come and have breakfast," said the lamb in its sweet milky voice. Then they noticed for the first time that there was a fire lit on the grass and fish roasting on it. They sat down and ate the fish, hungry now for the first time for many days, and it was the most delicious food they had ever tasted. I'm going to show you a picture. Here they are, and there's the three children and the lamb, and you can see it in the picture. Okay. "Please, lamb," said Lucy, "is this the way to Aslan's country?" "Not for you," said the lamb. "For you, the door into Aslan's country is from your own world." "What?" said Edmund. "Is there a way into Aslan's country from our world too?" "There is a way into my country from all the worlds," said the lamb. But as he spoke his snowy white flushed into a tawny gold, and his size changed, and he was Aslan himself, towering above them and scattering light from his mane. "Oh, Aslan," said Lucy, "will you tell us how to get into your country from our world?" "I shall be telling you all the time," said Aslan. "But I will not tell you how long or short the way will be, only that it lies across a river. But do not fear that, for I am the great bridge builder. And now come, I will open the door in the sky and send you to your own land." "Please, Aslan," said Lucy, "before we go, will you tell us when we can come back to Narnia again, please? And oh, do make it soon." "Dearest," said Aslan very gently, "you and your brother will never come back to Narnia." "Oh, Aslan," said Edmund and Lucy both together in despairing voices. "You are too old, children," said Aslan, "and you must begin to come close to your own world now." "It isn't Narnia, you know," sobbed Lucy. "It's you. We shan't meet you there, and how can we live never meeting you?" "But you shall meet me, dear one," said Aslan. "Are you there too, sir?" said Edmund. "I am," said Aslan, but there I shall have another name. You must learn to know me by that name. This was the very reason you were brought to Narnia, that by knowing me here for a little, you may know me better there." "And is Eustace never come back here either?" said Lucy. "Child," said Aslan, "do you really need to know that? Come, I am opening the door in the sky." Then all in one moment there was a rending of the blue wall, like a curtain being torn, and a terrible white light from beyond the sky, and the feel of Aslan's mane, and a lion's kiss on their foreheads, and then the back bedroom in Aunt Alberta's home in Cambridge. Only two more things need to be told. One is that Caspian and his men all came safely back to Ramandu's island, and the three lords woke from their sleep. Caspian married Ramandu's daughter, and they all reached Narnia in the end, and she became a great queen and the mother and grandmother of great kings. The other is that, back in our own world, everyone soon started saying how Eustace had improved, and how you'd never know him for the same boy. Everyone except Aunt Alberta, who said he had become very commonplace and tiresome, and it must have been the influence of those Pevensey children. The end of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is one of my top 7 favorite picks from the Chronicles of Narnia. However, beginning on Saturday, and like I said, we are taking a break. We're going to do it a little different tomorrow. Beginning on Saturday, we have The Silver Chair, which is also one of my top 7 favorite books from the Chronicles of Narnia. So I hope that you will join me on Saturday. We will begin The Silver Chair. And tomorrow, I just want to remind you what the plan is. We are going to go back to our original time, which is 7 o'clock. We're going to read Proverbs. We're going to kind of do everything a little bit quicker than normal, probably in 15 or 20 minutes. I will read probably a short story after we read Proverbs, and then we're going to turn it off so that the kids are doing something special tomorrow. So I hope that you enjoyed The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and I hope to see you back here again tomorrow and on Saturday when we can begin The Silver Chair. God bless you and have a good night. Oh, and Kimmy has something to say.
Hey, Dad, aren't there only 7 books in the Narnia series?
Yes, and every single one of them is one of my top 7 favorites. And I can't decide which one I like better, so that's how it is. All right. God bless you guys. Have a good night.